Hello, hello, my fellow Kenshi players. I am Hero in his head, your bald host, with my other equally as bald host, pt.1, and we are the Tengus Vault
Hello.
podcast here once again for episode 5. We're already at episode 5. My God, wild stuff, man, wild stuff. We are already at episode 5 of the Tengus Vault podcast, and today we're gonna be talking about the Second Empire, which is going to be uh it's going to be wild because the Second Empire is easily the time of Kenshi's history that we know we know a lot about, but also it's right outside that realm of we have no information and entering that realm where we have just enough to create so much speculation. Second Empire is easily one of the most speculated points in Kenshi's history. So that's the theme of today's episode is the Second Empire, and hopefully, I don't wear my voice down by doing this one because let me tell you, I have a lot to talk about with the Second Empire. Oh
Oh,
man,
well, like I said, we have a lot of information, so
yeah.
there is a lot to talk about. But I mean, listen, last time we had the Chaos Age, and we were like, oh shit, we have nothing to talk about the
Oh,
Chaos
I
Age, and
know.
then the craziest theories came up, and some stuff we haven't even thought about. So yeah,
It's
we'll see.
not only did
We
we
always
come
have
up with a
stuff to
crazy
talk
theory,
about.
but that theory directly lends into this particular episode too, because I mean, it kind of reframes a lot of the Second Empire in terms of Catlan's positioning and everything with it, like that. Oof, wild stuff, man. Wild stuff. Reframes a lot of stuff. Let me just pull up my
Wild
note here.
stuff.
While I'm pulling up my notes, Pedro, do you wanna maybe start us off with your knowledge of the Second Empire? What do you got, my guy? What do you got? Walk us through the timeline of the Second Empire as you know it.
Okay, I'm just going to
Ad lib it, yeah,
take
yeah,
the
real
last
quick.
podcast, like the Chaos Age, and we're gonna slither into that. We're gonna slide in really easy. So basically, last time we talked about Catlon, then we talked about a potential civil war between the skeletons, and that Catlon was leading the side of the skeletons that wanted to help the humans, and probably Elder was on the other side that tried to kill the humans. But in the end, it came to be that Catlon managed to seize power and he started to create the Second Empire. From what we know from the lore, Catlon was the leader, Catlon had his generals, and he actually started to redeem himself to the humans. He helped the humans, he made sure they were fed, but at the same time, lots of stuff happened in the Second Empire. Experiments. Then we had the cannibals to the north, who Ketlon had a lot of problems with. We had crazy stuff going on in the Second Empire. And eventually, of course, Ketlon's downfall. Then something big happened, like the fall of the First Empire. Something big happened in the Second Empire. This is also a very interesting theory that I always wonder what happened that led to this destruction of the Second Empire. Like, this is a really cool point, but I don't want to go too far in there. Let's start at the beginning, and that's where I want to give the word to you. How do you see the beginning of the Second Empire? What do you think happened after the Chaos Age?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, we talked about last episode. I had that lore aneurysm where I kind of started going off a little bit about Catlon and the Age of Chaos. And I'm not going to completely revisit the theory here today. We talked about it last episode, and I posted a video on it 2 days later. Let me tell you, I busted that script out. We got off the podcast, and I typed that whole script out in like an hour and a half.
Yeah, you were on fire,
I
man. You
was
were on
moving.
fire.
So
You
I
were
posted
like,
that.
I have to trigger stiff. I have to
I have to
trigger
do it.
stiff. There's
It's
no way.
specifically. So I cat to base it off of that, because I think that really reframes the Second Empire both in its beginning and in its end, all the way up to the modern day. I'll kind of revisit it a little bit though. The Age of Chaos, I theorized last episode, was actually a civil war that was fought between two factions of skeletons. So a faction that was pro-human and a faction that was anti-human. Both of them born from Stobe Sacrifice. So Stobe sacrifices himself The people the skeletons who felt guilt and remorse sided with the pro-humans, and those who wanted to finish the job that they had started at the fall of the First Empire sided with the anti-humans. There was a civil war. The Age of Chaos was basically an age where the skeletons were fighting to determine the future of humanity. Were we going to wipe them out, or are we going to guide them into the next phase? Are we going to right the wrongs of the past? And ultimately, I think Catlan was a integral figure during this time, and I think that Catlan was he was either the leader or, in my opinion, the leader, or at least a high-ranking officer that distinguished himself and was ultimately victorious and became the hero of humanity. He became the hero Catlan, which is why even in the modern day, the skeletons still look at him, despite all of the crimes he would commit that we're going to get into. Despite all of those crimes, they still look at him as a hero because underneath the veil of madness and insanity, he was a skeleton who honorably fought to protect humanity against his own kind for hundreds of years, who rescued them from the brink of extinction, propped them back up, and basically tried to right the wrongs of the past. He truly was the best of them. And so at the end of the war, Catlan, and his followers and his team, including Tin Fist. I have to bring up Tin Fist because some people asked me in the video, like, "What? You didn't bring up Tin Fist one time in the video?"
Tin
I'm
Fist
like,
fanboys.
I didn't bring up Tin Fist because I was really trying to focus on the meat and potatoes of the video, being that Catlan is Okrin. I'm sorry, Steve. I can feel the veins popping out of your forehead. Catlan is Okrin. And so I kind of left Tin Fist out. Plus, the only real like additional information we can add to that in terms of Tin Fist is there's that line of dialogue that Catlan and Tin Fist made a great team. I think that they were war buddies. I think they fought together. And I think Tin Fist was there at the founding of the Second Empire, and he worked alongside Catlan. But I think they were war buddies. So he founds the Second Empire, and he wrangles up humanity. He protects them. He feeds them. He gives them infrastructure, law, order, safety, the whole nine. Creates a system of infrastructure, agriculture, technological development. We know that the Second Empire, based on Catlan's old CPU description in the files, we know that they were an empire that was based largely on archaeology and the reclamation of old world tech. And that's something that I think is a direct antithesis to the First Empire. The Second Empire, despite the fact that it was trying to do the right thing, there was still a bit of ego in there. You notice that they're almost the direct opposite of the First Empire, in the sense that the First Empire was very based around manufacturing, based on creation, terraforming, manufacturing, mass production, mining, all of that stuff. The Second Empire was a little bit more militarized, less about producing new things and more about the reclamation of old technology. The reconfiguring and the repurposing of existing tech and existing ruins, rather than creation of new things. And they also, again, they had a much more militaristic viewpoint of things. So my phone. Who knew? So we go and get into the timeline there. I know. So Age of Chaos ends. They start up their empire and all that stuff. And I think at the beginning things were good. We don't know how long the Second Empire lasted, but I think for a long time things were good. Catlan was revered as a hero. They were revered as, Catlan was revered as a hero, the savior of the people. The Empire, clearly, like, he was beloved and doing right by people in some capacity in the beginning because they followed him, right? Like, the human beings willingly joined the Empire. The skeletons willingly joined his empire. Kirk says, yeah, the Second Empire doesn't seem to have gotten anywhere near the tech level of the first. Yeah, and that's because the skeletons, and I'll get into this a little bit later, they don't seem to have the ability to create. They can only repurpose, reconfigure, and do things that they understand. They can only rebuild and build things based on what they understand. And that's a byproduct of the limitations of how, like, they function, as skeletons. They are artificial intelligence, and I've likened them in several videos to, like, generative AI, in the sense that, generative AI and diffusion and all that stuff, in the sense that, like, they can only take existing materials or existing concepts that they have in their data bank, in all of that stuff, and they can use that as a template to build new things. But now that they don't have the First Empire to feed them that database, to feed them that data, because I've theorized that they were once connected to a larger mainframe for the purposes of patching and all information transfer and data transfer and orders and all of that stuff. Now that they don't have that, they are a bit more limited in their capacity um, for creation outside of what they already understand. It's a lot harder for skeletons to make new things because of the way that they function. But we'll get into that more in a little bit. The point being, though, is that the Empire was clearly good. It treated people well. It was good. People followed them. They wanted to be part of the Empire. Now we don't know the exact order of events, so I'm going to walk through each of the major portions of the Second Empire's history in terms of events and all of that stuff. Uh, and this is in no particular order, with the exception being the last one or two things. But everything in the middle, we don't know what the order was. We just know that they happened. We don't know when they happened, what happened before or after. We know that these things did happen. So there's the cannibal campaigns, which we know were fought by General Zhang and the Hydraulic Knights against the Northerners. We have the beginnings of the cult that would end up growing to become the Holy Nation. We have the introduction of the enforcers that would end up becoming the Shek. We have the famine that would really cause some serious issues for everybody. The explosion in the grid that caused the famine. The enthrallment of the remaining skeletons, and then obviously the disbandment of the Empire, and around the same time, the introduction of the Hivers. Now, I guess I'll start with the cannibal campaigns because that's really the one of the ones that I think would happen earlier on in the like in the Empire's history. They were still very organized at this point. They were still working together at this point. It seems so. The cannibal campaigns, obviously we know the cannibals, the cannibals.
Cannibals.
The cannibals,
Hello.
right, right. So they're living up in the northwest of Kenshi in the Cannibal Plains. And something that's really interesting about the cannibals is the skeletons have no understanding of where they came from. Skeleton dialogue says it wasn't always like this. We don't know why the Northwesterners suddenly developed a taste for humanoid meat. And something that I find interesting about that is that we've already come, to the conclusion based on previous episodes and conversations and stuff that the skeletons, well, they have a informationally they understand humanity from an information perspective. They fundamentally they don't get humans because they are not human. They don't function the way organic life does. And again, this is something I've talked about in so many videos. We attribute too much humanity to skeletons. We tend to look at them as if they think and function and learn and feel the same way that we do, as like organic living beings, and they don't because they're based in data. And so like there is a
Makes sense.
degree of misunderstanding between skeletons and organic life. I say humanity, but this includes the Shek and the Hivers too, to a degree. That they just don't get. They're never going to get it. This is evidenced by when you go to the Black Desert City, they still apologize for the crimes of the past when humanity has completely forgotten what happened. They have no idea what happened. Even by the time of the founding of the Second Empire, humanity doesn't remember what happened. They don't remember. They don't know that the First Empire was their empire, and that they are the the ancestors of what used to be a great spacefaring megalithic society with hyper advanced technology. They don't know. They don't know. You know?
But it's funny because it's like a very big mirror to real life, because even though we have history and
Yeah.
people we learn from history, but we actually don't learn from history. And the thing is, like, I think people tend to forget over like centuries. People keep forgetting what actually happened.
Yeah.
And if you look back, like in Kenshi terms, if you look back thousands of years, people don't care anymore. Like thousands of years later, and if we take Kenji in itself, because Kenji is like at this point, like not much is written down
Yeah.
from human perspective. Of course, skeletons remember, but humans don't, and
Yeah.
not much is written down. So, like you said, to humans just forgot. For them, it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, these skeletons, they oppress us. Fuck them. That's why the Holy Nation, I guess, was born in the end, because they were like,
Yeah.
okay, we're getting oppressed. Like, what the fuck is happening? These tyrants oppressing us. They're putting us in prisons. What the fuck is happening here?
Yeah. Yeah. So, with the cannibals in particular, in the modern day, Finch and everything makes this he makes some postulations about what could have caused the degradation of the humans in the North. He says, what is it, in the de-evolution of man? He says their degradation could be put down to toxic environmental factors, which they were unable to adapt to, damaging substances from their own labs, induced madness from experiments gone wrong, or simply reduced to cannibalism due to severe famine. Now, this is something that I've talked about at great length, but I'm going to talk about it again because that's why we're here. I think the reason that the humans of the North turned to cannibalism was as a byproduct of heavy metal and chemical poisoning their crops. And it's easier to explain when I have the map, but I'm unable to pull the map up currently on the pod. But you're gonna have to trust me. And I've got enough shorts that have talked about this. So we know that the water levels during the Second Empire were higher, and I've talked about in the past the reason why that is. The Age of Chaos, I think, was a nuclear winter of some kind or an ice age. And I think that ice age does what ice ages do. Very common occurrence with ice ages. Fun fact: when you have an ice age, the weight and pressure from all that ice and permafrost and all that stuff will actually cause continents. Because most people, again, don't think about this. Most people know, but they don't think about it. Continents and large land masses are usually actually like floating to a degree on the ocean floor, or like on the not necessarily the ocean floor, but also like on the mantle and all of that stuff. So the tectonic plates actually get lowered down from all the weight. And so it can simulate the idea during ice ages that the water level is rising. When the water level is not rising, the land level is actually going down. And then as the ice melts, slowly those lands go back up. And it gives the impression that the water levels are rising and lowering. When the water levels may be the same, the land masses are actually going up and down. This is something that you can look into on your own. But it is, a byproduct of an ice age. So the water levels on Kenshi were higher. We know that due to dialogue. When you go into the swamps, they say, the water was several hundred meters higher and all that stuff. And we also know that the water goes from south to north in terms of the swamp all the way up through to the floodlands, right? You can follow those signs of erosion. And we know that they go from south to north because the deposits of minerals and fertility changes on a gradual plane as you get up higher. So you start in the swamp, and if you follow the actual water trails on the map, the erosion, it goes up through all the way into Okran's Pride, right? Okran's Gulf and all that area.
Yeah.
Very fertile area.
Yeah.
So it's a fertile area. It's got a lot of minerals, a lot of nutrients. It's very green, but it's not as green as the swamp where the water would have originated, right? And so what it is as the water is moving from the swamp up north, you see the minerals being deposited along that pathway. And by the time it goes all the way up through Wend and into the floodlands, the minerals have been all deposited, and so it's just water. There's no more minerals. There's nothing good. There's no fertility. There's nothing good to like make the area very vibrant and green and lush. And the floodlands are called the floodlands because they flood. And in order to be a floodlands, you need to have no natural offset, no natural outlet for that water. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the floodlands. It'd be a river. It would be a river. It would be a lake. It'd be a stream. It's not. It's a floodland. So the water flows up from the swamp through Okran territory, all the way up through the Wend into the floodlands. And in the floodlands, it's just stagnant water. It's just still, right? And in the floodlands, also during the First Empire, was where all the skeletons were being produced. All the skeletons were being produced. We know that based on dialogue from the skeletons. They talk about how that was where they were born, where machines upon machine were building machines and machine. It was just an endless cycle of machines building new machines, and they say that was where they were born. So we know skeleton production happened up there, and based on the ruins, that was a large area of industrial manufacturing, right? And so I wonder why they put their manufacturing center in such a situation. Well, if you think about it, the landmass was higher at the time. It probably wasn't a naturally flooded area. It only happened as a byproduct of that ice age. I only imagine when they put the floodlands there, like when they put their skeleton manufacturing there, they thought that the landmass was going to sink due to an ice age. So I don't imagine they planned for that. So anyway, the area gets flooded, and all of these chemicals and all of these ruined pieces of technology and a lot of iron, which I'll get into in just a minute, lots of iron are now inside this still stagnant water. And I think at this point, we're all well aware of why stagnant water is bad.
Okay.
Stagnant water is where bacteria can thrive, where it just becomes it's bad, right? Still water
Mm.
is bad, really bad. Um, and it's like that for hundreds of years. And all of that water gets completely decimated with, chemicals and iron and all of that stuff, and it will naturally start to seep into the surrounding areas. And we know the water flows south to north in that particular river, that particular waterway. So it's going to continue going north. What's directly above the floodlands? The Cannibal Plains. Now, we know that it was heavy metal poisoning and chemical poisoning that was seeping into the land because the land of the Cannibal Plains is blue. The ground is like a blue-gray color, right?
Mhm.
And in real life,
Yeah.
there's a phenomena where if the soil, like an area of soil becomes waterlogged with a high concentration of iron, what happens typically when there's a high iron concentration in water, I mean, high iron concentration in soil, the soil turns to like a rusty color, like a red, right? But when you add in a bunch of water, the iron gets chemically like reduced, not literally reduced in terms of quantity, but chemically reduced. And that causes the iron to instead show up in the soil as blue. So you have waterlogged soil that is sucking in all of this iron and chemicals, and the soil turns to a blue gray color. And this is also present in the gut, where it's a low, marshy area, very waterlogged, with a high presence of iron, and the plants have actually adapted to absorb the iron from the soil. And that's why you can mine iron from the trees down there, and the soil is also blue. It's glaying. It's a natural, real
Mhm.
life phenomena called glaying. So the soil turns blue,
Okay.
and the skeletons are presumably the ones that are handling agriculture down there. They have a head of agriculture. In Catalan's forces, there's a head of agriculture. So they probably did not put together that human beings cannot eat crops that are grown in chemically laden, like chemically tainted soil, right? In heavy metal soil.
Mhm.
And, a byproduct of eating, taking in heavy metals is, I mean, without any other way to put it, it's brain damage. It's brain damage. It's the degradation of mental faculties, increased aggression, increased
Mhm.
um, increased aggression, a degradation of mental faculties, all of that stuff. And as a result of taking in and ingesting these crops over a long period of time, they start to decline. And when you look at the cannibals of the modern day, they actually have on their stomachs, the women in particular, have a symbol that is very, very similar to the Holy Flame.
The Holy Nation, yeah,
To
the
the
Holy
Holy Flame.
Flame.
So we know that
Exactly.
religious fervor can obviously turn into fanaticism, and fanaticism can lead to violence. Look at the modern day Holy Nation. So if you take that same principle and you add in increased aggression, the inability to find sustainable food because they come to the realization that the crops are killing them, increased aggression, and then you mix that with religious fervor and a decline in mental faculties, a decline in intelligence and reasoning ability, suddenly you have a group of people that are following a religious ideology that slowly devolves into ritualized cannibalism as they try to
Okay.
find new
So
sources of food.
just for the dummies out there, which I am, floodlands were producing skeletons. Ice Age came. Floodlands were flooded because of the production there. Of course, lots of iron, lots of chemicals that went inside of the ground. So the ground became poisoned from the chemicals. Um, Skeletons were growing crops there, were feeding them to the humans, giving the humans brain damage, just like me. And then they started to symbolize the holy nation. They didn't, or the symbols, whatever. So they started to, yeah, do that. And they started to degrade because poisonous food and stuff like that. And of course, if it's in their genes, they would probably give it to their, to their sons, to their
Which,
daughters.
in addition to the
And
prion
then,
issues, which we'll get into in a second,
yeah,
continue.
okay, in addition to these problems, but so to speak, they devolved, it became their gene, they multiplied, and because of the lack of food, they started to eat each other. and then they
Mhm.
started to become fanatics,
Mhm.
stupid fanatics in some sort, like
Yeah.
stupid fanatic tribe people, because of the poisoned plants from the floodlands.
Yep. And then as they started to devolve into ritualized cannibalism, this is also something that you can see in real life. There's a cannibalistic tribe that exists in Papua New Guinea. They practice ritualized cannibalism on their dead as a form of like is it like an honorific system? And in that tribe of cannibals in Papua New Guinea, they developed a unique disease called kuru, which is a prion disease. And the way that you get that prion disease is by eating the brains of the dead. And we can probably guess that the cannibals are not wasting anything. And the problem is that prions and prion diseases and all that stuff, they affect you on the genetic level. So if someone in your ancestry has engaged in cannibalism, there are genetic markers to identify that because it
Okay.
changes your genes. The human body is very opposed to cannibalism. It's literally it's funny because oftentimes when we attribute like morals, like the idea of like killing and stuff, that is a moral that we have imposed as intelligent human beings against killing, because we understand that when you kill someone, you're taking everything that they could have been, everything they were, all the future they may have, and we're taking that away. And so we attribute that as an affront to nature. But the truth is that that's something that we have attributed to it because we're intelligent and empathetic creatures, as we should,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but unlike with that, with the prion thing, that's literally nature saying, "Hey, don't fucking eat yourselves. Don't eat each other. Don't do that. Don't fucking do
Stop
that.
eating each other.
Don't
Don't
do
do
that.
it.
Don't do that." And so I find that really interesting. But so that will be passed down to the genes. That'll be passed down through those genes. Now, the interesting part about this is when you look at the cannibals, you have to assume that not everybody was engaging in the ritualized cannibalism because the cult didn't make up the entire population. So you need to look around for other signs of people that maybe are just as degraded but not cannibalizing. Well, what is right next to the cannibal plains? The Shrieking Forest with the Shrieking Bandits.
Oh, you bastard.
Now, you may be wondering yourself, why would the can like how would that happen? Why are the Shrieking Bandits the way they are? Well, the Shrieking Bandits are um, described by the nomads in Kenshi as being misunderstood nomads. They've developed their own culture. They've developed their own language. So, this is how cultures happen, right? Imagine you have a group of people that are living inside the society. A bunch of them start practicing ritualized cannibalism. They start going insane. They start hunting down other people that are not part of their tribe or even people within their tribes. They start hunting them down. You're not able to sleep anywhere because if you sleep, they'll come grab you in your sleep. So you have to be constantly on the move. You have to be constantly running. So you start breaking up into groups of people and you're always on the move. You can't manufacture clothing. You can't manufacture anything like that because you can't stay somewhere long enough to do it. You're constantly running. You're constantly yelling. You have to create intricate ways of communicating with each other that the cannibals aren't going to understand or recognize. Suddenly, over thousands of years of these people doing that, of running, never being able to settle, never being able to have conversation, only having to pass things through word of mouth, constantly being on the move, you develop a culture of being nomads with their own language that are constantly running, that don't wear clothes. Well, they originally did it because they couldn't manufacture new clothes. Now it's a cultural thing. Well, they originally screamed and yelled at each other and were constantly running for their protection from the cannibals. Now it's a cultural thing. It's developed over time, and it started with a degradation of humans, and they themselves were also degrading, but not to the same degree as the cannibals, because the cannibals kept eating brains and other people, which made them degrade even further due to the prion. That's also why they look so fucked up, right? Because the cannibals, they look weird. They look weird.
Yeah.
They have massive hands. They have huge protruding stomachs, and they got like short little dudes with gamer back. Like those are all genetic like signs to me of genetic degradation. That's not the cannibals are another race, because as we talked about in the pod with Frankie the other day, uh, that they're not another race. They are human. They are genetically devolved humans. That is genetic damage. That's like being born with skull, like the little ones are born, their genes are messed up and they're born with horrible scoliosis, and that's why they're hunched over. Like gigantisms, fucking pygmy, everything. It's bad. Like it's all genetically messed up. They're not in a good state genetically. And that's why the cannibals look the way they do. The Shrieking Bandits are less so genetic, are less so damaged than the cannibals because they did not continue to engage in the behavior that was damaging them. Now they've developed into a culture. Now it's a culture. Um, what do the Shrieking Bandits eat? They probably eat fruit and food and stuff that they find on the run. They probably, they have some kind, or they hunt on the run, but like they're constantly moving. They're a nomadic people. They're constantly moving. I imagine that they eat the same way that like the nomads do, just without the trade and stuff to buy rations. But like they just find food as they go, you know. Um, so that's what it is. Now the interesting thing about the cannibals and the cannibal campaigns is it's implied that the Second Empire was taking active fights against the cannibals. But based on the location of the Second Empire ruins around the Cannibal Plains, I don't think that was the case. I don't think they were actively on the offensive against the cannibals. I think they were on the defensive. I think when the human beings started to decline, the hydraulic knights marched on in, and they were there. They were fighting the cannibals, but they also don't want to be killing their own citizens, and they don't understand what's going on because again they're skeletons. We talked about that earlier about how they don't understand humanity on a fundamental level. They don't really understand what happened. Why are they doing this? They still don't understand, and so they don't want to kill them. They don't necessarily want to kill them because that could be bad optics. They've got other problems going on. Also, like again, the skeletons that founded the Second Empire were skeletons were pro-human. This is kind of killing a bunch of humans now. It's kind of flying in the face of everything that they founded the empire on. And so it's kind of implied that they took a much more defensive role. And instead of dealing with the problem, they locked the Northwest down and just kept them almost quarantined. And that would be also why the Shrieking Bandits didn't just flee. Why they didn't just flee to the rest of the empire, to the greater empire, the greater Second Empire, leave the territory. They were locked in the Northwest by the Second Empire, who were basically like, we don't know what's going on, quarantine the area. Hold the front, hold the lines, hold the front lines. We'll kill anyone that tries to come over here, anyone that gives us aggression, but we're locking this whole region down. And that's kind of the implication based on their positioning and all that stuff, because there's no reason that the cannibals, especially when they first started, couldn't have been wiped out. Why wouldn't they have been wiped out? They couldn't have been that numerous. Now they're numerous. Now it's a problem. But at the time that they started, there's no way that it was so bad. There was so many of them that the hydraulic knights couldn't take them down.
That's what I because lore. I mean, in-game wise, bandits are not that strong, and we know that the hydraulic knights were like the finest soldiers from the empire, and they would have had no problem taking out the cannibals. I never really thought about what you were saying, that they actually didn't kill them; they just quarantined them, and they started to multiply because they had time, they didn't get killed. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I think that they took I think they took a defensive position against them. I don't think that they were actively going out hunting them down. And we know that obviously to some degree, General Zhang or the skeletons as a whole did receive a reputation that is persistent in cannibal culture to this day. They refer to them as the inevitable one. But when they say it, they don't say the inevitable ones. They say inevitable one, which makes me think General Zhang. Which would make sense because he would be on the front lines holding the line against the cannibals. He'd be holding the line against them. I think that General Zhang is the one that which cannot be eaten. He's the big man himself. But so that's the cannibal campaigns, and that campaign started. We don't know when it started, but we know that it persists all the way to the modern day. We know the cannibals are still around, which means from whenever they started, whether it be towards the beginning, middle, or end, the cannibals were around the entire time. From when they started till after and all the way to the modern day. I will say it probably started towards the middle of the middle of the Second Empire. I mean, because the specific description for General Zhang's CPU says General Zhang, leader of the Hydraulic Knights, they fought on the front lines against to protect the empire from the cannibals and pirates. Their heroism is legendary. Now, the pirate issue didn't start until towards the middle of the Second Empire, and a lot of the people that were claimed to be pirates were not actually pirates. They were people that were being labeled as pirates so that they could justify attacking them. I also find it interesting that there was pirates up to the north. Now, if Kenshi's map is a lot more flooded, which it should be during the time of the Second Empire, it's interesting that General Zhang was up there fighting pirates too. I find all of that very interesting. But I guess we'll get more information on that when Kenshi 2 finally drops. But because of the use of the pirates, I would be willing to say that this happened somewhere between the beginning, early Second Empire, and the middle. That's my guess for that. So after the cannibals, we have the enforcers, the birth of the enforcers, right, and the cult of Stobe, or the cult of Catlon. We don't really know at this point. We don't really know. Things have kind of gotten
Maybe
interesting.
it's getting.
Someone.
I mean,
Go ahead.
they have to drop Kenshi too soon because I think the theories are getting completely out of hand soon.
They're getting wild,
I'm
man.
not sure podcast will cook up, but if we start to theorize more, then we actually can make Kenshi free at this point.
There's one particular comment that someone had made on my video about Catlon being Okran that I thought was really interesting because it kind of it leans into it just as much. So, where was it? Do you have anything to add to the cannibals while I'm finding this?
No. Cannibals are. I think we talked about this enough. We can jump to the next point.
All right. Well,
I mean, seeing how the podcast is progressing right now, I'm saying we might need to make a second podcast.
I know we may
we'll
need to do episodes too. I know.
Yeah, I wanted to say like we should jump to the next topic quicker, but I actually want to talk about it in detail. So
yeah,
it might be better to make like a second episode for the second
we'll do a part 1, part 2 on it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's my thought.
Yeah, I can't find it. There was too many comments, guys. Too many comments. Basically, the point of it was that it actually is. It's an interesting point that Catlon may in fact be narco, just based on the principle that like the way that the cult would progress, it would start out with them worshiping Catlon as a hero, not as a god, not as a mythological figure, but as a hero. And we don't know when the cult started. I'm assuming that we can probably assume that it started in the early days of the empire, but it became prominent around the middle. Like it slowly gained traction or became problematic, depending on how you look at it. So the cult starts. We don't know if it was a cult that was worshiping Stobe. The reason why I don't think it was worshiping Stobe anymore. Wasn't the cult of Stobe anymore, is because it says very clearly that they had started the Second Empire to right the wrongs of the skeletons in the eyes of humans, but humans had long since forgotten what they did. And if they remembered Stobe, if they remembered Stobe for what he had done, it would be they wouldn't have forgotten. They'd know, like, why did Stobe sacrifice himself? Instead, what I think happened was over time, Stobe, during the Age of Chaos, was mythologized by the remaining humans, and he became a figure known as Kytrin. Right? Catlon and the anti-human, the pro-human faction, Narco, the anti-human faction, they go to war. Second Empire gets founded, and this belief is that Catlon was a hero, and they start looking to him like a hero. They're not a cult. They are grateful people that it's hero reverence. Not quite the same. Not quite the same. It's hero reverence. It's the same way that we look at people that were heroes in real life. That we look at war heroes, that we look at people who had served honorably, the way that we look at people who have helped the world and changed the world. It was hero reverence at first. And over a couple generations or a couple hundred years, however long it was, that reverence for Catlon, as they started to blend myth and reality together, slowly became a cult, right? And they started worshiping Catlon not as a hero, but as a god, right? Catlon was their immortal savior. Humans don't live very long comparably, Skeletons live for thousands of years. Humans live what? 60 to 100? I mean, it's not, they don't live that long when you look at it like that. So over generations, Catlon is there for the beginning of, your children are born, he's there. They die and have their own kids, he's there. Those kids grow up and have their own kids, he's still there. He's an immortal figure to them. And the myth.
Go
ahead.
sorry that I bummed it there, but I just I find it so fucking funny because what you're saying, everything makes so much sense now. That's you said Stope is Chitrin, and instead of Okran and Narco being a person, it's actually the sides, what you
Yeah.
explained, which is already a really fucking good theory in itself. But now we're going back to the theory that humans have long forgotten
Mm-hmm.
what the skeletons did for them, that they saved them. But now you were saying that the cult was born because maybe they found some old scriptures or some stuff, but
Or maybe the
they
skeletons
heard that
talked to them about what had happened during it, right?
yeah, maybe they talked to them and they got it the wrong way, and it was just like, oh, there was a god, a savior who saved humanity.
Yeah.
Or maybe the cult was started in good faith, and then over the generations, because you
Yeah.
talked about this heavily, that the every generation of the Phoenix is getting worse than the Phoenix before that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's getting worse, and more fanatic. And maybe at the start it wasn't like that. Maybe at the start it was chill and everything was
Yeah.
cool, but then it started to get crazier with every generation of Phoenix, and it became this fanatic. It's man, this makes so much freaking sense now, and I
Yeah.
fucking love it because
So
humans. I'm sorry, so you can go ahead. I
yeah,
fucking love
yeah.
it.
So the idea is that the cult didn't start out as like this violent, angry cult or anything like that. I think that what happened was when the Empire was founded, they knew that Catalan and the skeletons were protecting them. They knew that that's what was going on. This war had been being
Mhm.
fought for a long time. I think they were aware of it. And I think that Catalan and them explained to a lesser degree what had happened, that there had been a figure by the name of Stobe, or a figure by the name, Kytrin, or whatever it was, whatever he chose to call them, because they're still trying to cover up the sins of the past, but maybe
Mhm.
not as clearly as they were. Maybe Kytrin was the name that Catalan gave to Stobe when he was explaining the story to try and cover it up. We don't know, right? So the humans, there's this civil war going on to protect them, and the Catalan and them wins. They start an empire, and during this whole thing, Catalan's telling them generations upon generations, stories upon stories, that there was this figure by the name of Kytrin that saved all of them from annihilation. And Catalan and his faction, the pro-humans, are the carrying on the will of Stobe. They're the good guys, but there are other skeletons that are like them that are the bad guys, that are trying to eliminate humanity, that have taken his message, taken Stobe's sacrifice the wrong way, and they're trying to kill humans. And then you have a figure, Stobe, that becomes the pro and anti-humans, or you have Kytrin that becomes Okran and Narco, the good guys and the bad guys, the pro-humans and the anti-humans. And the human beings, they start to worship and revere Catlan and Okran, or the pro-humans, as the Empire founds. But over generation upon generation, as this story gets passed down from human to human by word of mouth, eventually details get muddled. Things get wrong. Suddenly, it's not Catlan and the pro-humans. It's a god. Catlan's a god. He's been here since the
Mhm.
very beginning. He fought the front lines. Him. I almost made a short the other day, and I still may end up doing it. But like after I came up with that theory, if anyone's ever seen the movie Dracula Untold with Luke Evans, anybody ever seen it? There's a scene
Wait,
in the
I
movie.
think so.
There's a scene in the movie where they try to burn him alive inside a shack. His own people try to burn him alive.
Oh yeah, I've
And he
seen that one.
walks out and his skin's like regenerating in the sunlight, and the sun gets covered by the things. And he's walking out and he says, "You think you're alive because you know how to fight? You're alive because of me, because of what I did to save you." And like
Oh, I remember that.
I saw that I watched that movie the other day, and I was like, "Oh fuck, dude, it's Catlan. That's what Catlan did." And so that's how it's the whole thing. So anyway, over generations, the view of Catlan becomes mythologized all the way from he's a hero to he's an immortal god, to he's the embodiment of the god of light, Okran, to he's Okran. And this happens slowly over generations, many generations, from father to son to father to son, and it gets twisted and warped into something completely different. And this is not a like a reaching principle. This is something we see in real life religions constantly. It's word of mouth, adjustments, retelling, all of that stuff happens all of the time. So they start to view him as a god. They start to view him as the savior of humanity. I know, poor Steve, he's gonna have a stroke, man.
Sorry,
So they start to view him as the savior of humanity, this godlike figure, and they start to worship him, not revere him as a hero, but worship him. And I think to a degree, this starts to freak Catalan out because they've turned him from Catalan the hero into Okran the god. And if they can go from Catalan the hero to Okran the god, what's to say that they can't make it go even further and they can't start to undermine his authority? What's to say that they can't make things go even worse? What's to say they can't detach him from Okran? What's to say that their religion can't become, what's the word? Fanatical. What's to say that they can't become fanatics? And he starts to get stressed out. Mind you, he's also starting to succumb to the thralls of madness. He hasn't reset in a long time. He's starting to fall apart. He feels it. He's becoming more and more paranoid.
Do you think there is a reason why he never reset?
I
Do
do.
you think he had to keep on control? Like,
I
why
do.
he was like, oh, I have to keep
When the
control of
skeletons
everything.
reset, I've talked about it at great length, they lose their skills, they lose their personality, they keep their memory. So I want you to put yourselves in Catalan's shoes.
Okay.
You have spent hundreds of years protecting humans. You have been propped up by your kind and theirs as a hero and a deific figure at this point. You're their savior, their hero. You're the good guy. You're the hero who stands amongst them all. You raised an empire to protect them. You're righting the wrongs of the past. This is your empire. You spent centuries building it. You fought and bled to protect it. You killed your own kind to create it. And then you're telling me that I have to give up all of the things that make me a good leader, my strength, my wisdom, my charisma, my personality. I have to give all of those things up and become effectively a brand new person, lose the things that fundamentally make me who I am, my personality, my thoughts, my emotions, my reactions, lose every one of them and reduce myself to nothing more than an infant. And then I have to step aside while some other skeleton stands up and takes the empire that I took control of, that I made, takes control of the people that I saved.
Makes a lot of sense now, does it?
Would you do it? Would you be okay with it?
No, I don't know. I would not want to be in the position of power.
I know, yeah. And
yeah.
The other thing too is I've compared the way that the skeletons feel when they reset to I've used the same example a bunch of times, but I'm gonna do it again because it's honestly perfect. I'm a Doctor Who fan. The 10th Doctor, David Tennant, when he's towards the end of his run, he has a conversation with a character named Wilfred Mott. And Wilfred makes the doctor says, I'm going to die. And Wilfred says, that's okay. If you die, you can just regenerate. No big deal, right? And the way, for anybody who's unfamiliar, when the doctor dies, the way that they've kept the show going for 60 years is that when the doctor dies, or whoever's playing the doctor dies, he regenerates into a new person, brand new person, entirely brand new person. But he has all the memories of the previous person. So, Wilfred says, if you die, you can just regenerate. It's no big deal. And David Tennant looks at him and he says, even if I regenerate, it feels like dying. Everything I am, every thought that I have, all the things that make me who I am, everything that makes me me dies, and some new man goes sauntering away with my name and my memories, but I'm dead. I'm gone. It's ego death on the grandest scale. Everything that makes you who you are disappears. And I've had some people claim that, like, oh, well, memories are intrinsic to who you are. How can your personality be different if you have all the same memories? Two people can experience the exact same thing and respond in different ways. Memories are important for determining who you are, but what's more important is how you respond to those memories, how you respond to those events. Pedro and I can experience the exact same situation, the exact same scenario, and take it two different ways. I may take it positively, he may take it negatively, but that's a culmination of how we have chosen to react and build ourselves, our personalities, how we respond to things in regards to those memories. This is why people who go through several, live side by side the exact same way their entire life could turn out to be two different people. Because memories, while they are important to determining who you are as a person, it is how you respond to those memories that is intrinsic, that is important. And a lot of the responses that we have to our experiences and to our memories is a byproduct of emotion. So if you were to purge out your emotions and purge out your personality and you basically be a blank slate with no emotions, but you have all of those memories, you are going to respond to things differently. That's why if something that I did when I was 14, at the time I responded one way, probably poorly. Now I'm almost a 30-year-old
Feel you.
man. I look back on the situation and I would respond entirely different because
Same. Yeah.
even
I
though the
get that.
experience is there, the memory is still there. I am a different person with different. I view things differently. My emotions are different. My
Yeah.
mental state is different. I'm effectively a different person. And for the skeletons, imagine doing that, but having to do that exact same thing with thousands of years of memories that you don't understand anymore. You don't know who you are anymore. You have no skills,
Okay.
no
Yeah.
emotion, no personality. It's a full on reset, but you're filled with these memories of somebody who you used to be, but you don't identify with that anymore. It's got to be terrifying, especially for someone who was a hero like Catlon. Imagine trying to live up to the shadow of your old self. What if he resets and he can't do it anymore? What if he's not the same person? What if his ideology changes? What if everything that makes him effective changes?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
This
How are you
makes a
going to
lot
live
of
with that?
sense. I mean, I kind of had a thought that it was a thing like that because it's the same with Tin Fist, right? Because Tin Fist also never reset it.
Yeah.
That's why he became obsessed with,
Yeah.
like you said, with
Yeah, and mind you,
slavery
Kirk,
and
he says no one did more harm to the skeletons than Catlon. There's no defending his. I'm not defending his actions. I'm just explaining why he did it. He did wrong.
yeah.
Catlon did bad. He did very bad. But I'm explaining why he did it. Um. So, you know, this cult to circle back. This cult starts up, and they start to worship him as a hero. He's starting to lose his mind. He's going paranoid. He's starting to worry that people are going to come dethrone him. They're going to take everything that he's built, because he's the hero. He needs to stay the hero, and he's obsessed with that moniker. As his insanity starts to brew, he becomes obsessed with being the hero, with being the good guy. And he doesn't understand why people are starting to not view him as the hero that he used to be. Why people are criticizing his decisions. He's the savior of humanity. To have some faith, and so he starts trying to implement ways to deal with the cult. But he's also still intelligent enough to know that you can't just attack them. You can't just get rid of them. That's religious oppression, and that would make him no better than the First Empire. Make him no better. To have something that you perceive as a threat and then to eradicate it, that would make him no better. So, what does he do to fix it? Well, my theory is that he took the members of this cult, and this is a controversial theory. I'll go ahead and say it's a controversial theory, but I'm going to explain the science behind it too. Um, I think that he needed to justify cracking down on the cult. And in
Mhm.
order to do that, he needed to give them a violent element. He needed to have them start acting out in a way that is justifiable for him to respond aggressively. And
Mhm.
so he has his geneticists, his human geneticists, and I specify that they're human because again, skeletons can't create; they can only repurpose and reconfigure. So he has his human geneticists um, start doing experimentations to isolate genes in animals, um,
Mhm.
and to make them more aggressive, maybe a little bit sturdier, right? A
Mhm.
little bit more durable. And he does this starting with dogs. He does testing phases on dogs. And he isolates the correct genes. And after he does all of these testing phases on animals to make sure that it works appropriately, that he can, go through several generations, see how they respond, make them more aggressive, and all that stuff. He starts implementing those gene alterations without the knowledge of the people in the cult on the like unborn children of the cult. And the reason why I have to specify that it's the unborn children of the cult is because in real life, designer babies are a thing. You
Mhm.
can't fuck with the genes of fully grown people. It doesn't work out very well. You really shouldn't do it. You really shouldn't do it. It doesn't work out well. You get things like cancer, degradations, instant death, like genetic defects, all that stuff that happen. You can't do it. The more safe way to do it is to alter the genes of children that are still forming, right? And then
Mhm.
over the course of maturity, those genes will take root, take effect, and that's a real life phenomenon that happens now. You look at things like CRISPR, altering the genes of living creatures through CRISPR. Designer babies, giving kids hair color, eye color, specific temperaments, increased intelligence. Like these are all things that are actively being done and worked on in real life, and it's being done on babies specifically because they're a lot more malleable. They're still forming, right?
Mhm.
So They implement these genes on the unborn children of the cult without them knowing, during their routine checkups, during their medical procedures, all of that stuff. And as a result, the women of the cult give birth to children that are effectively human, but they're more aggressive. They're more aggressive. And these children grow up in the cult and they submit to the ideology of the cult. But they are more violent, more aggressive, and it leads to more extremism over a generation or two because these children grow up without the restraint and they have more aggression. They start being more violent. They become the enforcers of the cult. A lot of people have said the enforcers like they were working for Catlon. I don't think that's the case. I think they were the enforcers of the cult. The intention was to make them the violent enforcers for the cult.
Wait, you say they were working for the cult?
I think they were part of the cult. They were to grow up and become the violent enforcers of the cult, and that would give Catlon justification to crack down on the cult. Think about it like a protest where this is not, do not connect this to anything in real life. This is literally just an example. I am not making a political statement here. Imagine a protest where the government hires some dude to pretend to be a protester, go there with a brick and hurl a brick at the police. So then the police can be like, all right, whip out the fucking riot shield. Let's go.
Okay, I see what you're doing there. Okay, yeah.
They made them violent.
Okay.
So now they can crack down on the cult.
They made them violent.
Now, and these gene alterations over the course of the next 1,000+ years would slowly lead to the humans that were the enforcers changing, diverging down a different evolutionary path from the rest of the humans, to grow bone armor plating, to be more aggressive, to be less intelligent, the way they were designed, and they would end up becoming the Shek just because of that minor change in their DNA. And this is also the same thing that happened with the Bone Dogs and maybe the Pack Bulls. And that's why that bone armor plating exists on both, because the Bone Dogs were the test subjects. They were the phase 1 trials before they implemented those genes on people. That's why they went down a similar evolutionary path.
Okay.
That's why they ended up with bone armor plating.
Interesting.
So that's my thought on that. So the cult starts becoming more violent. Catlon starts cracking down on the cult. He says, all right, I got my justification. Let's take them down. They're becoming a nuisance. We got to take them down. So he has General, what was it? It was Hat 12, the head of police. General Hat 12. Yep. Commander Hat 12 there. Head of police. Takes his soldier bots and starts cracking down on the cult. Throws them in jail. Throws them in internment camps. The whole nine. Accuses them of being pirates and infiltrators. Mind you, there's a pirate problem that's brewing as well. Human beings are becoming more fed up with Catlon as they start to see through the reality of what's going on. They start to see through. All they see is the skeleton dictator that they once revered, all of a sudden turning on them, becoming tyrannical. And they start throwing them in cages. They start throwing them in internment camps. They're trying to maintain order at all costs. And it's during this time that a figure that we know as the first Phoenix shows up. Steve, I'm so sorry, dude. I'm gonna do it to you again. I'm gonna do it to you again. No. It's during this time that a figure that we know as the first Phoenix shows up, because all of these humans are being hold on, sorry, my wife just texted me. Oh, cool. So all of these humans are being oppressed, and mind you, not all of the skeletons are on board with this. Catlon was their hero for protecting humanity. They were the pro-humans. They killed their own brothers and sisters, their own fellow skeletons in that civil war to protect humanity. And now Catlon is being the exact thing that they fought against, the anti-humans. Okrin has been corrupted by Narco. And I'm using that comparison because there's a specific line in Holy Nation scripture that I think connects to it really well. This is really important. And this ends up playing into the idea that Catlon was Okrin and all that stuff. Where's the line? There's a particular one that's really important. Basically, it says that towards the end of, I think it's the Scripture of Radiance. The shadow banished holy body. Okay, I'll pull it up here in a second. There's a specific line that says after Okrin was done fighting Narco at the fall of, which would be the Age of Chaos. Here, I think I have it right now. Scripture of Radiance, right? Is it volume 1 or volume 4? Nope. Hold on, we're almost there. 3. Hold on, I will find this.
Find it. Do it now.
I need to find it because it's super important. It connects right to it. Written by the first Phoenix. Okay, well, I'll find it in a second. Basically, what it says is that at the end of the war between Okran and Narco, Okran absorbed Narco into his being, and all was well. But the agents of darkness would come later. They'd come back, right? That it would be a problem later. And the idea being that Okran absorbed Narco into his being, he killed the leaders of the anti-human party. And he effectively he became corrupted by Narco by taking in that Narconian, the belief of anti-humans, and over generations, he started to become more anti-human. He became corrupted by Narco. He took Narco into his being. It falls with the end of Catalan. But so the idea is that, yes, not all the skeletons were super happy with the whole, let's oppress human beings, let's attack humans thing. They weren't really for it, right? It wasn't for them. And the response was that one skeleton, in my opinion, they say the Holy Lord Phoenix, but we already know that the Holy Nations removed skeleton aspects from a lot of their history based on everything we've talked about. I think a skeleton of exceptional skill took pity on the humans that Catalan was oppressing in this cult. He took pity on them because he had also fought in the war, and he recognized the signs that Catalan was becoming the very thing they had fought against. And so he freed the humans, and he led the cult. Everyone that believed in the original what Catalan was, everyone that believed in Okran, the cult of Okran at this point, he led them on an exodus to safe lands. Now, Stiv. So I think I know. He led them on an exodus to safe lands. Now, I am of the mindset that this first Phoenix was actually a skeleton, not a human. I think he was a skeleton. And the reason that I think this is, one, who would have the ability to free these humans from their chains better than someone who was actively a part of the Empire, who was a functioning member of the Empire. And additionally, we know somebody else who would a skeleton have started the rebirth myth, though? Hold on, I'm getting there. So who else do we know? This one's purely theoretical. I'm not 100% sold on this one, but I think it's interesting. Who else do we know that has a certain hatred for the idea of enslaving humans, of capturing and putting humans in camps and all of that stuff, has hatred of it? And we don't really know fully where that hatred was born.
Couldn't think about anyone. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, shit. Stop it, man. Stop it. Yeah. Could it have been Tin Fist? Was Tin Fist the skeleton that led these humans on an exodus? Now, as Kirk said, would the skeleton have started the rebirth myth, though? I don't think, not directly, no. But remember everything I just said about the skeleton reset process? How it's like they die and become a different person. They lose all of their skills. They become an infant, basically. They have no skills. They have no personality. They're a blank slate.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Stop.
They become a blank slate that is effectively a brand new person. And we also know that the Holy Nation has removed many of the skeleton aspects from their own history to, as their history became more and more anti-skeleton. So what if the idea of a new Phoenix, the rebirth idea, the idea of resurrection for the Phoenix, is actually a either deliberate or indeliberate alteration of the skeleton reset process? What if when the first Phoenix freed humanity, he needed to reset? But the point of the skeleton still being alive is specifically that it's in the same body. Well, again, they're in the same body, but what if... So they're in the same body, but what if the idea was twisted? What if the first, maybe the second, maybe the third, maybe the fourth Phoenix were all the same Phoenix? Or even or what if the first Phoenix ruled for a very long time, led the people for a very long time, and then left? Saw the signs that the cult was becoming more aggressive, becoming even more anti-skeleton, or had just deigned that they had protected them long enough and named a new Phoenix. But over time, the idea of the skeleton reset, that process that was explained to them when the Phoenix said, "Hey, I have protected you, but I need to reset." And in resetting, because mind you, humanity's devolved pretty heavily at this point. They're basically fucking Stone Age compared to what they used to be. Their understanding of technology is not the same. It's not as simple as me explaining it with you guys. It's like trying to explain like a computer to a chimp. It's really not. It's not going to go well. It's not going to go
It's
well.
absolutely insane. Why do you always make so much sense, Hero? Can you stop? Can you stop? I swear you were writing the lore for Kenshi too. Keep going, man. I want to have Kenshi too, man. Keep hurry up, dude. We're all
So
waiting here.
this Phoenix explains to his followers that he needs to reset, and when he does, he's going to lose all the things that make him him. He's not going to be as strong as he used to be. He's not going to be as skilled as he used to be. He's going to have the memories that he used to have, but he's going to be like a different person, and they need to be ready for that. And they can build him up, and they can help him remember who he was. He's trusting them to raise him and help him become the person he used to be. But he's going to need their help, and he will protect them again because he remembers that he made that promise, that he made that oath. But he's not going to be who he used to be. So he resets. And maybe this happens a couple of times. Maybe it happens once. Maybe this particular leader left after a certain amount of time. We don't know. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of what ifs in this particular part of the scenario. But the idea that I think that is most important is that the idea of the Phoenix resurrecting is a cultural misunderstanding or deliberate or indeliberate alteration of the skeleton reset process. Because when you take the skeleton reset process and apply it to a human being, it is resurrection. It is rebirth. It is reincarnation.
I never even thought about this like that. Honestly, man, you're absolutely insane. Really, I never really thought about it. It makes so much sense. It does.
Yeah.
It would also explain like what your theory is that the first leader of the Holy Nation was a skeleton. Makes sense.
Yep. And I think that as their history, as over time, as their religion and their belief system became more anti-skeleton, whether it be that the first Phoenix left of his own accord, recognized the signs, whether or not it be that he died, maybe he wasn't Tin Fist, maybe he actually died. Maybe they killed him. We don't know. Maybe it could have been something like the faction became more and more hateful, more and more anti-skeleton, and eventually they said, you know what, fuck this, and they killed their leader, and then they said, oh, but blessed be, he's resurrected into this small boy. We still have our leader. And then they raised this leader to propagate their beliefs. We know that the clergy is very much the ones that are running things. When this current Phoenix was born, they picked his ass up, they raised him in isolation, and they created the monster that he is now. What if they've been doing that since the fall of the original Phoenix when they fucking killed him? And they said, no, but on his death, he's resurrected into this boy. Our Phoenix has been reborn. Yet, like, it could have been something like that. We don't know. But I like the idea that the first Phoenix was a skeleton, and that the reincarnation process is really just a misunderstanding or deliberate alteration of the reset process the skeletons have to go through, that we know they have to go through. It fits. If you take the reset and you apply it to a human, it becomes reincarnation. It's just, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say everything makes so much sense. Like, this podcast is currently really opening my eyes because sometimes some things you don't even think about it, but now that you explain stuff to me, it just makes so much sense. Like, because they must have taken the religion or their ways somewhere, and the closest thing is like the skeleton reset, like you said, like rebirth. You're resetting, like they believe in the rebirth, which is the reset for the skeletons.
Yeah.
But for them, it's, I guess, something different, being reborn into a new body or what else. But it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It also makes sense where it's coming from. The evidence is there, but I just never really thought about all of this. But now that we also established like that Okran might be Catlon, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
This is like, but it makes so much sense. Everything connects. Like I'm always thinking about the dude who has like his billboard up and he's explaining like this. He's like, it's like the heroes putting the pieces together, and I'm just standing there like, hell yeah, he's right.
Yeah. So Kirk says my theory is that they're just mistaken about it all. Occam's razor. So I would agree with that in real life. Let me explain why I don't agree with it specifically in this in Kenshi. Or in writing. And this is a conversation I've had with Pato before too. In writing, when you're world building, especially for the Holy Nation, which has the most world building out of any faction, they were one of the factions that were in the original alpha in the old world. They have the most history about them. They have the most lore written about them. Most of their stuff was written very thoroughly in compared to like some of the bandit factions or something like that where they were just kind of thrown in. The Holy Nation has the most concrete and established lore. Now, the reason why I have an issue with the idea of it just being so simple that like, oh no, they're wrong, or it's an abstract concept, or it's a misunderstanding of history, or I mean, or it's like a like just an idea they came up with to justify their hatred and stuff like that, is that when you're writing complex world building, when you're writing complex world history, or you're trying to connect and create an interconnected web of history that flows very well, or doing any kind of writing, you always need to ask yourself, does this inform on the world? Does this, like, how does this benefit the world building? Um, I'll give you an example. I could say that the cannibals were actually uh, from another continent and they sailed over and they weren't actually cannibal. They weren't actually the degraded people of the North. Um, they were just a group of random people that sailed over and started eating people. Now that's a cool idea, but it doesn't inform the story. It doesn't inform the lore. It doesn't add to the world building at all. It doesn't add anything. It just is people that showed up. Um, yeah, this is art. This is not life. You have everything has to inform something else. Everything is built upon something else. It's layer upon layer. That's writing. That's good writing. That's what writing is. When everything builds upon itself. The fall of the First
Yeah.
Empire, the Age of Chaos, the Civil War. Okran is Catlon. Catlon is Okran. Start like all of that stuff. The cult starts. History gets construed. Real life events become myth. Myth becomes exaggerated. Exaggerated becomes fanatical. Fanatical becomes hatred. Hatred becomes the Holy Nation. And it's all based on real world events that have been misunderstood and tainted and altered. And if we're willing to buy all of the previous points about Kytron being Stove, Okran being Catlon's pro-human faction, Narco being the anti-human faction, all of that stuff, then we already know they have the propensity to look through their history and remove the skeleton aspects. Why would the only thing they didn't do that to be the reincarnation? Why would they just pull that one out of nowhere? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't build on it. Instead, it's built upon the principle that the Holy Nation is a religion that has fundamentally altered itself to remove its own history to justify its current hatred, which is they took real world events, removed the skeleton, and that's what their history is. And that builds upon the world. Um, again, it's one of those things where like I think a lot of people will come up with really interesting theories on Kenshi that I think are really fun, but they don't add to the world building. They don't build upon anything. They don't add anything. It's just it's the rule of cool. And I think the rule of cool is
The
cool.
rule of cool.
But it's important to remember that when you're building a world, you start from A and you have to get to B and you have to make sure everything between A and B creates the road to lead to B. You can't have a road that goes from A to B, but also there's another road way over there, and we're not going to talk about it, but it exists. That's not how people do writing and world building. Not good writing anyway, because fundamentally Kenshi is a story. A story is being told, and so everything in that story has to inform upon the rest of the story, or else it has no place, and it probably wasn't there for a good reason. Which is why I don't necessarily buy that.
Even if half of our theories are wrong, let's say half of the theories we had are wrong, it would still be genius writing,
Mm-hmm.
connecting so many points from the time, the history of time, like the First Empire, the Age of Chaos, and everything like that. Combining all of this and making sense is just genius writing, and I am missing this in so many games. Many games
Yeah.
don't have that, even not even close. And you have like this gem of a game, this indie game, and that has such a insane history, backstory, lore that connects in the end. And it somehow connects. Whatever we are right or wrong about some aspects, but it still connects. Everything has a connection, and that's absolutely insane. I fucking love it. That's why I love Kenshi. It's exactly why I love Kenshi.
Yeah. It's good writing. It's just good writing. You know, there are some things in Kenshi, like it was originally built as a passion project by one guy. Obviously Nat came in sometime later and like helped like redefine and write the fix the writing and wrote a lot of the story and stuff. And there are some things that are in there because of the rule of cool. I acknowledge that, you know. I'm not gonna say that's not true. But I think that some people sway so far in that direction that they think that everything is basically just like an asset flip or the rule of cool. Like, why is the Holy Nation there? Because Chris thought it'd be cool. Why is the United Cities there? Because Chris thought it'd be cool. Why is the Skin Bandits there? Because Nat thought it would be cool. Like that's really not the case. That doesn't make sense. There is deliberate intention behind the writing, and it's up to us as the viewers to figure it out. And I'll never claim that everything I'm saying is correct. I'll claim that it's the theory that I'm currently buying based on the information that we have. And if I'm proved wrong, then I'm proved wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, it's theorizing.
We are
it's
theorizing.
All a theory.
It's still, if you have other theories, that's totally fine. But we're just theorizing what could potentially be had happened. But it makes a lot of sense to me. Like when we talk about this, like lots of theory here is putting up here, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It connects, like the lore in Kenshi, it still connects too. It would make sense.
Yeah. So it's all there. I was gonna dive into the famine, but we're getting close, so I think we'll just kind of keep on this point. We're getting pretty close to that time, so we'll make the next episode's probably gonna be a Second Empire Part 2.
Yeah, maybe there'll be Part 3 too. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how far we get. We'll see how far we get. So, but no, I think that the Holy Nation's entire, I think that's poetic too. I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant. That the entire the nation that hates anybody that's not a human was founded and is entirely built upon non-humans. I think that's brilliant. I think the idea that the entirety of the Holy Nation's history has had the skeleton aspects removed and has been translated into myth and exaggeration and become legend, and underneath all of it is the truth. The thing that they hate the most, being skeletons, was actually the whole reason they're here in the first place. I think that's poetic. I think that's brilliant. And I think that is something that it's so painfully ironic is what it is. And I think that's one of the reasons that I buy it more than anything else is aside from the fact that it all connects very well, it's so beautifully ironic. Because everyone hates the Holy Nation for the most, except for Stiv. Everyone like hates on the Holy Nation in the community. Like of the vast majority of the community really hates on the Holy Nation because they're the ones that we can identify with the most in real life in terms of like the way that they behave. Right. The truth is that the Shek are just as bad. The United States are just as bad. Everyone's just as bad, not worse, just as bad. But the Holy Nation strikes a chord with us as people because we can identify, and to a degree, we like to attribute real world politics and real world history to the Holy Nation. And so we feel a greater hatred towards them on average. Like people tend to dislike them more on average because they attribute real world, like the real world to them. But I think that every other faction is just as bad. Now, with that being said, I think that it's brilliantly poetic to take the faction that everyone or the vast majority of people hate so much and add that twist, add that level of irony to them, where it's, yeah, they're the anti-skeleton, they're the aggressive, skeleton hating, human extremists, but they were actually founded by skeletons. Their religion was founded based on skeletons. The Shek were
Mhm.
actually born from them, which I guess actually I could close out on the Shek thing. My idea of why the Shek were born the way they were with the genetic alterations of um, the women of the cult. So there's a specific line that is used with the Shek. Where talking about? Where is it? Hold on. Gotta find that. Okay. The Horn Devil was created human as a brother of the Okranite, which means at one point they were good with the Okranites, the
Yeah,
Shek. They were good with
true.
the Okranites, and they were the brother
Mhm.
of the Okranites. They were born from the Okranites. They were part of them. They were family. But the Horn Devil possessed a sinful mind. They were more aggressive. They were more hateful.
Yeah,
They were more
true.
aggressive. It
Mhm.
rejected Okran's light in its heart in favor of Narco's temptation. Now the original Phoenix had lines about treating everyone with basically the original the concept of the Holy Nation was actually a lot more like a lot more respectful, all of that stuff. Let us not yearn for the pleasures of the flesh, but yearn only for the love of our Creator and the well-being of mankind. Let us not be tempted by the self-luring sexual misdeeds, intoxication, theft, wrong speech. Let us show kindness to our brothers and sisters and never harm them, never feel any envy or animosity towards them. Like so, the Shek or the enforcers being born with these alterations that would make them more aggressive, they'd give into a lot of that stuff. They'd give into wrong speech. They'd give into misdeeds. They'd give into violence. They'd feel envy and animosity. They'd feel a lot of those things. Their emotions are heightened. They're angrier. I think we lost Pato. Um,
No, no, no.
he's.
I'm still
Oh no,
here.
you're here. Okay, well, your screen, you're frozen. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Oh,
You
oh,
were
I'm
you were
sorry.
frozen for
Sorry.
like half a sec. No, you're good.
My
Um,
internet might be.
you're good. You're good. So and then it said, where is it? Um, in the darkest moments, our brightest light came. The Phoenix. Okran sent us a champion, one that would restore our faith and banish the shadow. Phoenix came from the everlasting foils. Nope, that's not the right one. Oh, there it is. There it is. The promise that man would once more live free. He saved us from both shackles and bestiality, and united as one with the holy bindings. One by one, the dark ones were slain by the blade of the faith. I basically think that what happened was the original Phoenix. Not only did he free them from their camps and stuff, he spilled the beans about the alterations that have been done to some of their more aggressive and violent members. And as a byproduct of that, that was what started the division between the Okranites and the Shek. The Shek and the Okranites were once part of the same faction. They were brothers. They were the children born of the cult. And the division happened when the original Phoenix spilled the beans about what had happened, said they were altered, they were more aggressive, they're violent, and so the cult was like, no,
Oh,
fuck that. These guys are the enemy. These are the altered. These
Jesus
people were altered.
Christ.
We got to kill them. We got to take them down, dude. We got to cut them down. And so that was where
Okay.
the division between the Shek and the whole nation started. And I think that also lends. Granted, the hatred of women in the Holy Nation has become far more prominent in recent history because of the current Phoenix's doctrines and stuff. But I think that the general mistrust of women is again a cultural misunderstanding because the women of the cult gave birth to what would be the enforcers that were the children that were altered without their knowledge, and
Mhm.
those children would end up growing up to be the instruments that were used to oppress them by nature of their violent means, their violent nature and all that stuff. So um,
Yeah.
I think the idea is that the Holy Nation, again, in that like that alteration of history, they think that the women of the cult or the women of their early history gave in to their Narconian temptations and effectively like gave birth to the children of Narco,
Yeah, makes
the
sense. Yeah.
Shek.
Yeah.
Um, and so but I think that's where the initial divide between Shek and the Holy Nation started. Was the Shek were born as members of the cult, and they were aggressive, they were hostile, they were more violent, they were more extreme. And when the Phoenix freed them, when the Phoenix freed the people, he didn't want to free the ones that had been altered. He didn't want to free the ones that were more aggressive, that were more violent, because they were the ones that technically caused the problem. He spilled the beans about it, told them the truth, and the Holy Nation started fighting against the Shek, because the Shek were their brothers, but they were actually they were actually alterations by what the Holy Nation had come to change from what was originally Okrin, being Catlan, to Narco, the false light.
Makes sense, dude.
It's all there,
Makes
man.
a lot of sense.
It's all there. And I think that's why the Holy
Absolutely
Nation and Shek
insane.
hate each other. I think it was born from there, you know?
Born from there makes sense.
So
Well, this is this might be a free time podcast episode. I mean,
yeah. We still got a bit more to talk about, that's for sure. Wait till we get to the Hyper section.
It's okay. We have no stress. We can make 3 episodes. We can make 4 about the second number. There's no stress there. Like whatever. We can like put like a name on it. Like, okay, first episode of the second podcast is like the cannibalism, and then of course the Holy Nation. Second one can be hivers and stuff like that. So that's fine. No stress here.
So just you wait until we get to the Hyper section towards the end. That's going to be the one that really ruffles some feathers.
Hell yeah!
Oh man! All right, guys. Well, we are at the time. We're at the 1.5 hour mark. So we're gonna wrap it up here. I appreciate you guys popping in as always. Fantastic stuff, guys. Fantastic. So we will see you guys in 2 weeks for episode 6. Well, no, we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it later. I'll see you guys for episode 6. 2 weeks. It'll be a good time. We're revisiting the Second Empire because we weren't able to finish it today. I knew we weren't going to be able to. There's so much to cover, man.
That's way too much lore there, but it was obvious, an obvious thing.
So, all right, guys. As always, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for popping in. This has been Tengus Vault. I'm here in his head. This is pt.1. See you guys in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Cheers. See ya.